Sundang. We're at Denizen's Brewery. Yes, it's a little awkward to kind of lean in and talk like this, but it's just for the sake of trying something new. They also gave us some fries with cheese and ketchup. I think that this was complimentary. That's pretty awesome.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I didn't order it. They just brought it here, so I'll see
we were
what
somebody else.
I don't know. I'll look at my tab, but either way, it's all on me. However it comes out. So we're going to address an issue that's been talked about among politicos and on 7th State and Bethesda Beat, and kind of the buzz around everything that's wrong with government. That is the budget shortfall. From what I've seen, Montgomery County has a budget shortfall of $120 million, and they want to cut $56 million, and a lot of that is to be from public schools. Now, I'm not going to ask you what is your solution to everything. What is your solution to this budget shortfall? But I want to know what, as a council member, would you do to try to avoid that kind of problem? Because they say it stemmed from less than predicted tax revenue. It also could be federal policies or state policies that we may not have direct control over. But what kind of preventative measures might you attempt?
Well, I think first of all, we have a $5.5 billion budget in Montgomery County, and so 120 million, which sounds like a lot, is actually a small percentage of that budget. It's just a little around 2%, and so a little over 2%. So one of the things that I actually appreciate from going through the budget is that we actually have a reserve. The county has it's roughly about $600 million reserve for, paying things, but I think, the county executive, of course, says that he doesn't want to touch that yet, because that's something that is agreed to with the bond rating agencies to keep our AAA bond rating, which is the top rating you can have. You want to have a reserve to pay your debts. And of course, the county, I think each year, our debt is, I think, roughly around $328 million or something. So we do have enough reserve to pay for that, but as an agreement to keep our AAA rating, we're not going to touch it unless we really need it. So the county executive wants us to take measures, what's called a savings plan, and he's asked his agencies to all cut about 2%. And of course, part of that is the school system, and I think I've seen that they're asking the school system to take a cut of, I thought it was roughly around $28 million or something like that.
Yes. Now, why would you say there's so much of it is taken from the school system as opposed to
$25 million?
Yeah.
Well, out of the $5.5 billion that is operating, about half of it, $2.5 billion, actually goes to the school system. So, so $2.5 billion. Actually, I think they're asking if you take 28 million, it's a little more than 1% cut, as opposed to the county government. They're being asked to take about a 2% cut. So he's actually cutting more on the county government side than from the school side.
Now that sounds like something that should have public approval, right? Because a lot of the criticism says, oh, well, there's wasting county government. There's too much money just spent on administrative costs and not enough in this or that. But if more of it is shifted towards that, it sounds like it should have, the court of public opinion should be more or less in favor.
Sure. I mean, I think the approach that the county executive has taken is sort of like a across the board, what they call across the board cut, where it's pretty much the same, all agencies, and of course, and that's an easy way to do it. It's not the most efficient way to do it. The best way to do it would be to prioritize. What are the most critical services, including education, things like that, and rank them, and then the services that are not as critical, you can take a larger cut in those types of services, and the critical services you should be able to take a smaller cut. Now, in the case of the school system, of course, I know that the county executive has asked for a smaller percentage, 1%, and as compared to the other departments. But it's not, I don't think it was necessarily any type of prioritization. Possibly, I mean, if you wanted to say, well, he prioritized the school system because he took a smaller cut, and it is the biggest chunk of our budget, 1%, and then everybody else had to take a 2 or even maybe more than 2% cut.
Yeah, I guess it depends on whether you're looking at the real number amount versus the percentage of how much of the existing percentage of how much it takes.
That's true.
So that makes more sense to me, because the way I read it was, okay, this is the proposed cut, and basically half of that is cutting from education. That sounds disproportionate. But when you look at
the whole budget, the school gets about half, almost half of the whole budget.
There are a lot of school-age children.
There are.
And it's growing.
Yeah, and I actually know that the council last year funded the school system. They actually increased school funding by about $100 million to hire more teachers. So, even above the normal funding. So they added $100 million to it. But of course, with this unpredicted revenue shortfall, they just had to take measures, and it's happened in the past. This is not the first time. When during the recession, or starting the recession, which started in 2009, 2008 actually. But
yeah, I remember trying to find a summer job in 2009.
Yeah, I mean, we were losing so many jobs, so many businesses went out of business. We were in a free fall, and so the county at that time actually had budget shortfall, because if people weren't working, they're not paying taxes. Yeah, there's no tax income. Fortunately, though, we still had our property tax base. People still own homes, so what they did was they actually raised the property tax to try to meet some of that, to close some of that gap.
Yeah.
And then of course they've lowered the property tax, and then of course in 2016 they raised it again. So it's been
and it's almost an unwinnable situation. It looks like we need government to be running. We need these services. We need to address budget shortfalls. We need to maintain our reserve. We need all these things, but no one likes to see any of their taxes go up. So how does one defend things that may be right but may not be popular?
Well, I think there are other places that we can look. Okay, first of all, raising taxes is not the answer, because council just raised taxes, property taxes, by almost 9% back in 2016, fiscal year 16. So, but there are places where you can look for savings. For example, so I work as a budget expert, but I also happen to be a procurement expert.
Exactly.
Yes. And so, in our county government, we spend over $1 billion every year buying goods and services for the government, from private companies or whatever, vendors that provide the service. And I know that, being a procurement expert, I know that there are strategies you can take. For example, encouraging competition. That actually when vendors have to compete, for the contract, that actually lowers the price. And I've seen, when we decide to have competition, I've actually seen the price of a contract, the value of a contract actually drop by more than 20%, almost 30%. Now that's unusual. I mean, that's an unusual case. It doesn't always happen. I mean, it might drop 10%, but that's a savings. I mean, if we spend $1 billion, if we can get savings of just from competing of 10%, that's a savings of $100 million right there.
Yeah,
so,
wow.
Yeah.
Now, is this something, again, I don't know the ins and outs of the county budget. I didn't even know how large it was. Presumably you've studied this, and as a council member you would know even more. But would reevaluating procurement costs, now would this be targeting, say, one or two really large costs that we're spending way too much money, like big contracts, or is it kind of 10% here, 10% there on everything across the board?
So the way it would work, because you have products, right, and you have services. So on the product side, you definitely want to try to compete those for products that are sort of like commodity products, like pens. I mean, we buy a lot of pens, and so we compete that. Who's going to give us the best price, right? Staples or Office Depot or whoever, all right? Because whether you get it from Staples, Office Depot, the pen is pretty going to be it's going to work as a pen if it meets the definition, and it may not be the perfect pen, but it'll do its job. And if it doesn't, you can still go out and get more, like buy another pen. It's a low risk factor, is what I call it.
Yeah.
And now, the ones that you have to be careful about is what I say, best value. Because, if you're doing something very important and you don't want to have a low risk, okay, you want to have low risk of errors or failure, you can't really I would not recommend trying to do the lowest price, what they call lowest price bidder wins, because, it's kind of like building a rocket ship with all the, have somebody build it who happened to be the lowest bidder, and they would build it with all the lowest price parts. So it's not a good.
If it falls apart, it's just gonna cost you.
Well, it's very expensive, right? It's space programs, for example, cost billions of dollars.
Yeah.
And I've seen cases where they launched the satellite and it just blew up, and that was it. You just lost $1 billion right there. It's not like you can buy another one easily. And another way I could put it is like if you wanted to, say you wanted to bid out a service for brain surgery, you wouldn't want to go to the lowest bidder.
No.
You want to have the best surgeon, and they might cost a little more. You may have to pay a little more, but you have to really take the strategy, you have to limit it perhaps, or not open it to everybody, but perhaps, you might invite 3 or 4 of the top surgeons to bid on it, but it would cost a little more.
Yeah, so kind of optimizing cost and quality seems basic economics, but
right.
I think what I was wondering is, are we talking about pens or are we talking about rocket ships?
Well,
or
okay,
all of the above?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's sort of all the above, because when the budget is given to all the departments, they all use part of their budget to procure goods and services. It's not any one department. Now there's a procurement department that helps them buy these things, but they, if you work for Health and Human Services, for example, and you needed pens, you would go and say, okay, I have this much money and I want to buy pens, or I have this much money and I want to hire doctors, right? And the same thing with, say, the Department of Recreation. I have this much money and I want to hire part-time soccer coaches or whatever. It's, each department has their own procurement budget, so it's you really don't. The idea is you're not going to target any particular program, but whenever they say, oh, I want to buy pens or I want to buy certain things, you say, well, let's try how we can try to compete.
Right.
You know, whatever it is you're buying, and try to get the best price for the government.
Right. And then analyze the low risk.
Yes, yeah, you have to see what risk level is acceptable. If it's pens, you can take a higher risk level.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to just buy another pen.
Yeah, if you buy a pack of pens and they happen to just like run out of ink and dry up fast, then okay, you just spend the $10 for that pack of pens.
You buy, you buy
probably
more.
Okay.
And it's quick. I mean, it's not like you have to wait a year. Whereas a satellite, you may have to wait 2-3 years.
Right, and then a lot is lost, and honestly, probably less faith among the public in the government's ability to use the satellite, if that's what we're talking about.
Exactly.
Now, shifting gears a bit, since I am going to have to spring a controversial question on you.
Sure.
Since we are in a brewery, there's, of course, the controversial discussion about the Department of Liquor Control. Now, a lot of people think that it's the county's monopoly over it is outdated. It has detrimental effects on craft breweries. But then the other argument is, amidst a budget shortfall, how will we make up for that lost revenue and the unionized workers? Now, I'm going to have to ask you point blank, what is your position on that? And if it's some kind of compromise, how would you reconcile the lost revenue now that we already have a budget shortfall? Even though you did say that it's not as much in comparison to the entire budget as some think.
Right. So that's a good question. My position on the liquor control, I actually do support the current policy of keeping the county involved because two main reasons. One, the issues that we were having was mostly a management issue. That just wasn't getting good service, and I think the county executive addressed that issue by changing the management, and I think we've had much fewer complaints since then. The second is because we have the county acts sort of like a wholesale seller of liquor. It gets it brings in about $30 million a year. From selling to the liquor, the rest of the businesses.
Yeah, it's like 25% of the shortfall we have.
Right. So if you this, I would not say that this would be a good time to change the policy because we're already facing a shortfall. And actually, next year we will also be facing a shortfall. It's approximately a $90 million shortfall projected.
Additional.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Wow.
For next year.
Oh wow.
Fiscal year 19. Oh yeah. That's this 120 is just for this year, but next year will be So
now would not be the right time to completely relinquish.
Right. Right. So with that said, I do support small businesses. We do want to grow businesses in this area, and I mentioned, my top priorities is jobs, education, and transportation, known as JET. But we need to create more good-paying jobs in this county, and one way to do it is support small businesses so that they can grow their business, and also work with small businesses more as partners, collaborate to find out what are some of the things that we could do to help them grow their business. It's not enough just to say, well, we want to help you grow your business, but let's be partners rather than having an adversarial relationship and penalizing them for not complying. A lot of small businesses don't necessarily have all the staff to keep track of all the different regulations that come up every year. They pass so many laws in Annapolis every year, and the county council also passes laws. You always need a professional attorney on staff to keep track of everything.
Right.
But rather than requiring them, having them do that, they can say, well, we should hire on the county professional attorneys on staff to help small businesses figure out all the things that they need to comply with and help them find a way to comply.
Right. No, I agree, and I think that in the discourse, it seems to be too black and white. It's too much, more taxes, less taxes, more regulation or fewer regulations. But it seems to come down to, well, some regulations make sense and some do not. It's not simply a matter of quantity or how much government intervention is it. Does this regulation apply in this county to this kind of business? Or is it something that's just kind of written in there and has no sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's important to have consumer protections in place. Okay, public safety, consumer protection, that's important, and also environmental protections is very important. We need to protect our environment for the long term. But other than that, we need to, look at other regulations to see if they make sense, and whether we should, try to streamline some of those regulations, or even just the process of doing business. Applying for permits. Find ways to speed it up, and provide better customer service. Really, is what I call it.
Yeah, and I've read in county executive arguments how to make the DLC in this case operate more like a business. That doesn't mean the same as actually being privatized.
Right. And I know the county executive hired somebody from the private sector who is trying to run it more like a business. And so, like I said, they've had fewer complaints, much fewer complaints, and so that should, I don't know what the long-term goal will be, but currently it seems to be working now.
That has to be a good sign.
Yeah.
And now, final question on this, and I have to ask it since it's kind of up there on everyone's mind. Thoughts about Amazon? Are we jumping too far? Are we too enthusiastic? Do you still see that Montgomery County has a good chance of landing it? Do you think it would be a net positive, even though it might bring more traffic, more demand on infrastructure? What are your thoughts on this whole Amazon craze?
Well, I think, Governor Hogan. Well, I think it's a good thing. We definitely need to throw our hat in the ring, because we don't try. It's, like I said, we need to increase, attract and retain more good jobs to the county. Amazon promises to bring about 50,000 jobs, 50,000 good-paying jobs. Most of them are going to be over 100,000. So we definitely need to try to bring them here. If it's trying, it's the hardest part. Then that's what we need to do. Work hard up front. But I know the governor offered $5 billion incentive, but not all of that is tax incentive. Most of that will be for improving the transportation infrastructure. Which would be amazing. If you bring a company that size office here, you definitely need to build, the public infrastructure to accommodate the additional traffic, like you said. And then, of course, there is a small tax incentive. I believe that the county executive explained that, it'll be like maybe a 5% cut out of 100% of taxes, right? So instead of receiving 100% income tax, the county and the state would be receiving 95% income state tax. So it's better to get 95% of 50,000 employees than 100% of zero. If we didn't give them any tax incentive, they may not come, and we would get zero. So I think we're definitely competitive. We're competing with other, 19 other jurisdictions.
Right, and everyone I talk to, from even within the DC area, people in Virginia think that they're going to get it. I know people in Boston think that they're going to get it. I guess it's good to operate with cautious optimism.
Yes.
So that you're not already painting the walls of the building, but structurally how you could house it if you were chosen.
Yes,
I think we should be cautious, but it sounds like the tax revenue, as you said, and the benefits for transportation.
Yeah.
Maybe the red line would stop breaking down. Although I don't even know if Metro is
Yeah.
a factor.
And hopefully we'll have the purple line built by then too.
Maybe the BRT. I don't know.
Yeah, and the BRT. The lots of, depending which location they choose.
Yeah. So there's White Flint, and is there another option?
Well, I've only heard about White Flint now because that's going through the master plan.
North Bethesda, aka Rockville. They can argue that semantics.
Yeah, but definitely we have the workforce. That's one of the things in Montgomery County, we have one of the best cybersecurity workforce in the whole country. Because we have the federal government right here, and the intelligence community, and so we definitely have a lot of IT professionals and information systems professionals right here, and that's what Amazon is looking for. And we have a great community here as well in Montgomery County, and that's what they want. They want a good quality of life for their employees. So I think we have
tax incentives are one thing, but having a desirable place for your employees to raise their families and to live and get to work every day, that's also what matters day to day.
Yeah, I mean, whether, I guess they have to ask, whether they would want to raise a family here. That's very important. And I think Montgomery County, we are a great place to live and work. We still have some challenges, with the transportation, but I just read, about half of our schools, half of our high schools have high graduation rates. And so, our public schools, Maryland was ranked number one for public schools for about 6 years in a row. It's kind of dropped to, I think, it's dropped in the rankings in the past few years, but.
Well, I'm not gonna blame Hogan, or maybe
I don't know what happened, but
this seems to coincide. But I won't jump to conclusions or anything. Well, we're just about out of time, and thank you for, it's a slightly awkward setup, but as I said, I wanted to try to do something different, and thank you again for coming and sharing your insights, and I'll see you at the event that you're holding. And to close out, why don't you tell the viewers and listeners where they may find more information about your campaign?
Oh, sure. Easy. They can go to my website. It's votedang.com. So it's VOTEDANG.com. And they can also look at, I'm also on Facebook and on Twitter, Hoan Dang for County Council.
All right. Well, it's been a pretty good timed interview. Sometimes they go way over, but I know it's been kind of an inconsistent schedule here on the MoCo Millennial, but this will be out pretty soon, and then I'm going to have an interview very soon with Tacoma Park Mayor Kate Stewart coming this weekend. So thank you again, and have a great rest of your day or night or whenever it is that you're watching.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, and thank you for listening.